Complaints. I'm your host, Becca Scott.
And I'm Jake Michels.
Also a host / co-host. This is a podcast about people who love tabletop games, interviewing other people who love tabletop games about the tabletop games they love and topics related to tabletop gaming. Changed it there.
Your audio speed is not messed up on your podcast listener, I promise. That was us.
We go slow, or we just go really fast, or one of the two, or
Becca,
both at the same time.
If someone is listening to this on double speed, they are so upset right now.
They keep changing it and then changing it back. What, half speed? I wonder if anybody puts me on half speed because I do have a default of fast talking.
And listens to us for 2 hours as we drag through a conversation.
Maybe. Okay, well, we should let our guest be introduced, so now then he'll be allowed to speak. Today we have Mark Streed in the house of the Dice Tower, specifically the board game corner of the Dice Tower. He is a contributor for the Dice Tower, specifically reviews for ongoing Kickstarters and for prototypes, and just a wonderful human being. He lives in Colorado. Hi, Mark.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, and collector of hats. We forgot to say that one.
Collector of hats.
Yes.
Except it's all flat caps.
Flat
That's my
caps.
thing.
I didn't know that's what you called the thing.
Yeah, it's my thing.
I called it like a newsboy.
It's like a newsboy.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do each of you at the Dice Tower have a hat theme?
I don't. Tom has many hats,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So he's
Literally
all over
and
the board.
figuratively.
Tom
this is so true.
Vassal, the originator of people on YouTube doing board game content.
We should tell people what the Dice Tower is in case they don't
Right.
know.
Yeah.
We should do that.
You
Absolutely.
should tell us, Mark. You
so
know best.
The Dice Tower is probably the premier place currently that has the most content of reviews. I mean, they're just pumping them out. It's amazing. And I love that, you may not be interested in all those games, but there's so much variety that you can pick and choose the things you want to see. You don't have to wait for a long time for something that you might be interested in. Because we have so much content. And it's
fair to say, and obviously you're wonderfully biased because you work for them, but it's fair to say if there's a game out there that's out, Dice Tower's got an opinion on it, already.
You would think most games. I mean, there's more games than we can cover,
of course,
really, right? But
not
the
literally.
Majority of the ones that people know about are going to be found there. And we have a ton of contributors, too, that throw in reviews and add stuff to Board Game Breakfast and all the different shows that we do, right? So,
yeah. Well, Tom Vassal was the first face of the Dice Tower, but now there are so many contributors because every game essentially is covered. Mandy Hutchinson, one of my favorite humans, is
amazing.
A contributor. Let's see. There's Suzanne.
So the two of them do the podcast.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that podcast, actually.
Yes. We came up with our own name, and when we got introduced to Tom, and we kind of had a branding of our own, right? But we're I always think of Board Game Corner as the CSI to Tom's CBS or whatever, right? So
wait, so you specifically do murder cases?
Yes, all murder cases.
You're digging up corpses.
Yep.
Got it. No, you're doing prototypes.
Yeah, so now
explain to us exactly.
For the last 2 years, I have been doing all the Dice Tower previews. I have over 200 plus of these videos, and they're all, this is the interesting, they're not all Kickstarter. So they started out that way, right? It's just Kickstarter. We're doing previews for Kickstarter folks, helping out the little guy, helping out the big guy, whoever wants the preview. And it's a promo, right? I might say a couple things I like about the game, but I'm not telling you to buy it. I'm just saying.
Not a review,
it's
a preview.
Not a review. It's a preview. And it's also an overview of the game. I might dive into some rules, but gloss over others. I'm really there. I really want those videos to feel like we sat down at lunch and I'm telling you about this game I just played. Yeah. And that's what makes I have so much fun with that. It's just exciting.
Your joy is effervescent.
It's so
fun. It really
fun.
is. You're a very fun person to be around because you're so genuinely excited about games.
I love it so much.
I think maybe that's because you are, just these past 2 years, you've been a professional
full-time
YouTuber, essentially.
And before that, I started the Dice Tower stuff 6-7 years ago now. And it was just sporadic because I had a day job in the tech industry for 20 years.
Your origin story.
Yes, origin
and then you
story.
were bit by the board game spider?
Yes, but it goes back even further. I don't think I even told you about this. So my degree is actually occupational studies and photography. And I went out of school, worked at a newspaper, and during my last year of college, I got hooked up with Fan Clubs Inc. And they, at the time, there wasn't really internet to date myself. But we were doing Lucasfilm Fan Club, Star Trek Fan Club, now Star Trek Insider and all that.
You mean the official ones?
The official ones.
Wow.
I was the photographer.
So you were like a third-party company that did it for those companies?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so Dan Matson was the president publisher, and he just started it out of his basement when he was a teenager, really. And Gene Roddenberry got a hold of it, and he loved it.
What?
And it's amazing. So because of Dan,
Wow.
I got to be on set for Star Trek The Next Generation. I was on set for DS9.
Stop, I'm so jealous.
Yeah,
Patrick
the
Stewart's
DS9
a god to
sets.
me.
Oh yeah, he's amazing. But the DS9 sets were the best sets I've
They
ever
were really
been
great
on.
sets.
Deep
They
Space
were.
Nine, huh?
It was like you felt like you were on the promenade. It
Yeah, well,
wasn't.
they had a lot of height to
Yes,
them.
it was a huge.
That was
set.
an impressive. Those were
Yeah.
impressive sets for sure because they had such dimension to them that
Yeah.
you never experienced before. They had like battle scenes on that bridge way more than you
Yes.
ever could in like TNG. Was just like the bridge,
Right.
Yeah.
And it was cool to
Yeah,
be
it
on
was
the
a great
Enterprise,
bridge.
right?
Yeah, of
But it
course.
They
was-
had a holodeck.
It
they
felt
go
like
on
a set.
planets.
They kind of always had to go to the holodeck or the planets
Right.
to have the big moments, whereas
Yeah.
in DS9 they could happen on that set.
Right.
Yeah.
And there were moments on the Enterprise where you stand on the transporter platform, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm here. So I did all
That's
that. It was on
incredible.
Voyager. It was on the Voyager set. We also did Back to the Future Fan Club. So I was on the set for Back to the Future Part 2.
And so when you are working for these fan clubs, you did photography for
Yep,
them. So you did a lot
I
of
was
BTS.
photographer.
Okay.
So we
those
did-
all shot in LA, right?
Yeah, we came out. The magazine was based in Aurora, in Denver.
Whoa.
So we would come out here to do stuff.
Wow.
And we did, when like Willow came out, that was a huge thing. We went out and did all the coverage for that. And the interesting thing was that I did all photography for the products that even ended up in the soundtracks.
Wow.
So I did all that photography as well. So I have this crazy photography background, and then I went into the tech industry. And
As you
but I
do.
met a lot of the folks that I still stay in touch with for Star Trek. I run into conventions and stuff through Dan. And now Dan, he is Ashley Eckstein's publicist, who is Ahsoka Tano in the Clone Wars
Whoa.
and does her universe. So that's where I got to meet Ashley and her husband. And it's all because, again, Dan, he's been kind of the catalyst for all these neat things. And I think my favorite story about all the Star Trek stuff was that the first time I met DeForest Kelley, who played Dr. McCoy, right? So it was amazing to me because I was like 21, 22. I don't know,
Wow.
21, I think, 20 or 21. Anyway, I went to the back room with Dan and I didn't even say anything. And Dee's like, oh, you must be Mark. I'm like, what? And Dan's like, yes, he reads the magazine. He knows who everybody is who works. And I was blown away. My 12-year-old self was freaking out. So that was an amazing experience. And
That's so cool.
Yeah. So all the Star Trek stuff was amazing.
Yeah.
I loved it so much.
So from there you went to tech, and then
Tech, I was a web developer, just a front end web, HTML guy.
Yeah.
And over 20 years, I became the tech lead. I managed a team of developers in the Fort Collins office. It was for a company called Wirestone. And we were all over the country. And I was the tech lead in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Oh, so you were doing remote business before that was even a thing.
Before it was
now
a thing.
everybody
Now
does it.
All right. So that was a really good experience. I mean, I did a lot of visual related things that would even help me to today in doing videos and stuff because I did video for them and I did photography for them. And the neat thing was that I was a developer, but I could also speak designer, which is a very rare thing in the development world, right? So it was an interesting dynamic that I could go meet with the designers and come back to the developers and go, this is what they mean.
Right. It's
Yeah.
like a film director that can both talk to actors
Yeah.
and knows how to speak DP.
Yep. So those
Director
were
of
amazing
photography.
times. And it feels, right? It feels kind of surreal that all that happened.
Right,
But
that
it
was
did.
your life,
That
man.
was my life, yeah.
You've done so many things, and
Yeah.
now you're making board
yes,
game videos.
board game videos, which
there's
I think
nothing else
even
one could
though
want
the
in the
Star
world.
Trek stuff, even though the Star Trek stuff was amazing, I think I'm having the time of my life now.
Yeah.
It's just the best.
well, you're creating a
I'm
lot,
creating.
you know.
And before it was just like, oh, you need to shoot this, or I'm interviewing somebody and I would shoot pictures of that or whatever. But now I get to create and and I'm the
Yeah.
guy on camera instead of the guy behind the camera, which is so. If you told me 7 years ago that, hey, people, like thousands of people watch your videos. I'm like, I'm not doing that.
Well, what changed?
A big part of my change overall has been a confidence boost based on losing weight. So over the last 2 years, I lost 141 pounds.
What?
Which is incredible.
Yeah.
141
How
pounds.
insane is that?
Yeah.
That's so impressive. Congratulations.
I was thinking about, that's me holding 3 bowling balls.
Oh my gosh. I feel so. I was not even in this kind of shape in my 20s. So I've never in my entire life been this fit.
What was the
That's
impetus?
amazing.
I would walk from the parking garage in my day job to my desk, and I was wiped out.
Yeah.
And that was, I got to change something.
Good
and
for
then,
you.
I had already started doing some videos for the Dice Tower, and I'm like, I got to look better on camera. So that was definitely part of it. So.
But that's not an easy,
it was
sure,
not
lots
easy.
of people want to, but you actually did it.
Yeah.
And
it
it's
was really-
hard because our society is so screen based and screen focused and so much about convenience and even the food options that are available. It's so easy to like lose track of that when you're focusing on getting your career ahead or whatever else.
Yep. And the thing, all I did initially was I would fill up my plate like always and cut it in half. And that's all I did for like a month or
Interesting.
2 months. And it made a huge difference,
Wow.
just that.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, I'm starting to feel better. Maybe I'll go walk at lunch. And I would walk like 15, 20 minutes. And now that's turned into, I walk like 2.5 hours every morning. I hit the trail like at
incredible.
5:30 or 6 in the
Good
morning.
for you.
And I blow through audiobooks. I love it. Or podcasts. You're on my regular rotation for listening while I walk.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So does your wife walk with you?
No.
You've been married for 30 years because your
30
anniversary
years,
was
yes.
this week.
Thank you for saying so. She was hoping for a shout out somewhere.
Hey, Anna.
Yeah, so it's interesting. She has MS, so she has a little bit harder time to
That's
get out and do that
tough, yeah.
stuff. So her energy level's lower. But she tries, like here and there, like weekends, she'll try to go walk with me and stuff. But I have to, it's weird. You get used to a pace, and I'm on the edge of running. 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm walking like
Yeah.
4.5, 5 miles an hour.
Wow.
So I do like 10, 12 miles in 2 hours and 20 or 30 minutes.
That's amazing.
Wait, say that again?
10 to 12 miles just about every day
In 2 hours?
in 20 minutes. Yeah.
That's
seems
like
fast.
a pretty good
That's
half
super
marathon
fast.
time.
Yeah.
Like that's
And I get home, I'm like, I could just do that again. I don't even feel. I'm starting to worry. I'm like, should it be this easy?
Well, my dad retired last year. He's 65, 66.
he's in that range.
Yeah. And basically what he's done, besides taking up painting briefly, he has always been a marathon runner. And he's started traveling across the country doing half marathons. He was in Cleveland this
That's
weekend.
amazing.
Yeah. And that's basically how he's spending his retirement, is doing half marathons all the time. And I think it's a pretty good way to continue to take care of yourself.
Yeah. Sponsor of the podcast, Moving.
Yes.
Sponsor of the podcast, my dad. Just kidding.
Well,
Not anymore. Thanks, Dad.
Let's talk about like your experience being a board game previewer.
Yeah.
So you get to get your hands on a lot of prototypes of
Yes.
games and games that are still being developed.
Mm-hmm.
And
They're always perfect, right?
Oh yeah.
Prototypes better than the printed version, as they say.
This is one of the things when I interview people before we take on the job. I'm like, I'm not super concerned about exactly how the game plays. I'm more worried about how does it look on camera.
Right.
Because this is a promotional piece for you. You should make it look as good as possible.
Yeah.
Don't send me a DeskJet printed version of your game.
Right.
Now
You
we
know?
should start with the caveat, of course, of like a lot of these people are doing this independently and
Yes.
like have a very finite resources, and some of them, especially for you two, like you do a lot of Kickstarter ones as
Yeah,
well.
a lot of
So
Kickstarter.
so a lot of
Hand
these people
paint your cards. I don't care.
Yes.
Just make it look good
Make
in the
it look
video.
good.
Yeah. No, and I'm saying that caveat just so we're not like bashing the game
Right,
designers.
no.
I know you're not, but like now at least set that standard.
Mm-hmm.
Make your prototypes
Well,
still good.
and now that there's things like Game Crafter, it's really not that crazy expensive to do that, right? The people.
Explain to us what Game Crafter
Oh
is.
man, you can submit all your art and get actual cards printed as if they were published.
GameCrafter.com.
Yeah,
manufacturing is starting
Manufacturing
to
is-
go long ways.
It's the best way to, at least for me, to get a prototype, because I actually get shipped direct from Game Crafter a lot. they'll have it printed and just shipped right to me.
Yeah.
So, and they really do. GameCrafter does a fantastic job. I mean, you would not always, but I would say 80% of the time you're like, this looks like it's done.
Yeah, for sure.
Amazing. So you can just do a one-off, or you sort of do like a test
and it's more
run.
expensive to do a one-off,
Right,
right? But
I'm sure it's
typically, I think they make like 10 copies or something.
Very cool.
Something like that.
Brilliant.
But yeah, so that's great. But that's the biggest thing I look for. Does this look really good on camera? And then secondly, I ask them to just tell me about the game. I want to get a feel of what it's like. I don't need you to tell me what you do on a turn. I want to understand. I'm trying to get them to give me their passion about it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why I do those meetings. And then that feeds into why I'm like, yeah, we'll take that on, because I see how excited you are. It sounds neat and so forth. So
I want to talk more about prototypes, but quickly, how you started working with the Dice Tower. Because
yes.
what Tom told you, I thought was really funny.
This is great. So like he did a board game breakfast like 6-7 years ago now. So, and he said, and this is when Dan King and Ryan Metzler were key people doing reviews all the time where Tom was. And Sam and Z were doing little things here and there. This is before the three of them were like the core guys.
Yeah,
really.
Sam, Z, and Tom are now the three pillars of the Dice Tower.
They are the pillars.
Constantly doing
They're
reviews.
amazing. Every one of them are just amazing people. And if you get to spend time with them, it's just so fun. So that was just, and that's, before I go on, that's a really neat thing about board gaming industry in a whole. Just about everybody you sit down with is genuinely excited to be there and like, oh, let me show you this. I love that.
A lot of us are hobbyists of this first, and then we're lucky enough to get into the industry of
right.
it.
I think we're still in
grateful.
awe
Yeah.
if we happen to be able to work in this industry.
Yes.
None of our parents believe that we really
I know,
have jobs
same.
of this.
It's so true. So Tom put a call out and said, hey, if you want to do reviews, let me know. And so my co-host Randy, who he has a day job, he works at HP, so he periodically joins me. But I copied him on an email to Tom, didn't tell him I was doing it. And I said, yeah, we'd like to do that. And so Tom writes back, well, I'd have to see something. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. And we thought this was going to be like a demo reel, right? So we pulled a game that we played a bunch with family, like Walk the Plank is what it was. And it's a Mayday game. And we did a quick review of it, but it took us forever because it was the first time.
Yeah,
you got to set up lights and
hardest.
cameras and set background.
And we're on camera, and I'm super nervous. You can go
Make
watch
sure you're
the
not
video
shiny.
still.
It's on there?
It's still on there.
Your first one?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Walk the Plank.
Wait, because you thought this was just
a demo
for him and only him
Yes,
to
to
see. And he
see.
said, great, Dice Tower now owns this video.
And
Thank
he
you.
just put it up. I'm like, Randy and I were like, oh, I guess it was good enough.
That's nuts.
So we came up with the Board Game Corner name and all that, and our tagline that we have in like 15 minutes, and then let's just do this.
Which is see you at the table?
Yes. Until next time, we'll see you at the table.
Yeah.
So
Perfect
all
sign-off.
that. So we've had that same tagline for 7 years now, but and it's so funny the comments you get back from people on that tagline. I waited at my table for days. You never showed up. This is so fun. But yeah, that's how it all started. And then we just periodically, because both Randy and I had day jobs in the tech industry, and we would just periodically do videos here and there. And we did stuff on, like when we were Board Game Blender, we would do stuff for that. And that's kind of where I started doing like some interview stuff called Corner Chat, which I'm doing more of again. But it was all part of a segment. So it was like 3-4 minutes, of a larger show. We just did a number of different things. And then I got laid off. And
Which is the best thing that could have happened, right?
It is, actually. Oh, my gosh. I was super stressed. It was, 2 years ago now. And I was headed to Gen Con right on the cusp of getting laid off. And I told Tom that I don't know. I'm coming. Everything's paid for. We might as well do this. And while I'm there, he proposed it to me. How do you feel about playing Kickstarter games? I said, I'm good with that. And what's been interesting
He's
is that
like, you never know. They're
never
not vetted
know.
yet. It
Right.
could be
It could be
anything.
but I've been really surprised. I would say 70% of what I get is at least decent, right? At this point, people are not. It's not like the early days of Kickstarter where we're like, ooh. Although I've had a couple of those.
I was thinking about Office Space and the jump to conclusions match.
Yes, that one. That's a perfect
So
one.
less jump to conclusions mats, more deck builders that someone has had spreadsheets where they have balanced. Each card was statistical analysis. Yeah, like thought put in.
Yep.
Before we
Before we talk about deck builders, we should probably take a break. Oh man, we really got you with that break. You didn't even know it was coming.
How'd you
Very
enjoy that
little build up.
break?
I hope you had a fun time. Hope you maybe got a snack or a beverage. We're here with Mark Streed, who's telling us all about what it's like to review prototypes for the Dice Tower.
Yeah.
So can we? What's the? I wish you could tell us what's the worst one you've ever got. That's a terrible question.
can't
Don't tell me.
you.
Don't tell
I'm
me.
not- I'll tell you off.
Tell us
Mike.
tell us the things you've seen that are like, oh boy, like not necessarily naming names.
The don't list.
The
Yeah,
don't list
yeah.
rolling moves, and specifically
just in general.
Wait, the genre?
Unless you're
The whole genre?
reinventing
no,
the genre.
A rolling move with like a 4-sided dice, things like that.
Oh, interesting.
Ooh, a D4 is
Yeah.
not my favorite die to roll ever.
It's right?
It's a little pyramid
Yeah.
that just falls on one
So
side.
there's
It
things
doesn't
like that
even
happen.
roll.
You kind of
And
need
then-
to roll a minimum of 8 at a time to make it fun, right?
Ooh.
Like if you have a
I'll
high-level
try
magic
that.
missile or something.
If it was like 3D4 or
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that, then that would be something different, right? But so things like that are, and then we've gotten a couple prototypes where they obviously went to like a toy store and got a bunch of toy soldiers.
Interesting.
Did they
These are the early
paint
days, right? These are the
them?
pioneer days.
Yeah, so this was early, like when I first started, things like this were happening. Although it's been so much better over the last year. I mean, people really are putting a lot
Well,
more.
the standards
Why
have been
is
raised.
that?
Yeah.
Is that just Kickstarter? Just there's so much competition. Yeah.
So much competition.
If
yeah.
if you are not going to get seen anyway,
Yep.
why would you pay to have it reviewed?
Exactly. But I've seen little games, and obviously the funding levels are very different, right? But I've seen little card games get funded with like my video has 500 views, and then a big game that has over 3,000 views doesn't get funded. It's never.
But they have a much higher
They
price
have a much higher price point, but it's not like giant difference, right? It might be like 10, 15 grand different, right? Where I would expect if it was like a 30 grand shift or something in the funding goal. But I've just been surprised that it doesn't feel like views equate to funding.
Interest doesn't equal investment.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
there's also the thing that we were talking about with Scott Gaeta of Renegade Game Studios, where the more complicated and crunchier a game is, the smaller the pool of people that will be able or interested in playing that game. A party game, a play the player, judging game, that has a much wider base. It's more mainstream. It's not what us erudite, sophisticated gamers would pick first to put on the table. But but that has mass appeal.
It does.
So,
And
but that's interesting. Views do not equal funding.
it doesn't always, but there are some. I mean, like when I've done some CMON stuff, that's, or come on now.
I heard that too. We were talking
they're
about that in our
changing
last episode.
Yeah.
Come on.
Come on.
Come on.
So
Simon.
for you, top priority is actually like the pieces are together.
Yes.
The game as a prototype. It at least looks like
It
what
looks
pretty close to what it
done.
will be. Yeah,
Right.
it looks done.
It at least artificially looks done, right?
So our experience, at least I'm speaking for us at Game the Game, Becca, has been more importantly
Eggshells.
well, importantly that the game rules wise feels complete.
yes, because you have to play out a whole game, right?
Right. And if there's gaps in that rule book in terms of what we're understanding, it's a real detriment for us.
And there's
Yeah.
always gaps in that rule book.
Yeah, always.
No, it's not. There's like
Well, every game needs play testing,
It does.
and because whoever made it makes assumptions of what they have been working with for so long, so close to the forest you can't see those trees.
Yep.
Of you forgot, you never told me to draw cards or whatever it is.
Exactly.
My experience with prototypes, our experience on Game the Game, is frustration when they're not funded, because if we're doing an ongoing Kickstarter, we very much prefer for it to already be funded. And that is the strategy with Kickstarter in general. You want to make sure that you have talked to all your friends and potential investors, and you're setting your Kickstarter goal at a lower level than what you actually need so that you can get it on the first day. Why? Because psychologically, people are more likely to donate if it's already successful. Yeah, people are drawn to success. If it's like, I don't know if that's even going to get made, I'm not going to donate. You're helping it not get made.
Right.
But psychologically, we just don't do it.
Which is so weird because I came from a marketing company in the tech industry, and it would, in their mind, if you had a campaign on Kickstarter for 4 weeks, you release new content every week instead of day one, release everything. They would be like, that's nuts. You need to keep interest throughout the whole course of the campaign, not just that first day. So it's a really weird dynamic.
But you say now,
everybody
now you
wants
see
day one.
everything day one.
And
I mean, that's what I would prefer because I don't have enough time. If I make it to your page, I'm going to check it out, and then I won't have another chance to come back.
It kind of feels like the current metagame of Kickstarter is to invest in day one and make a big turn one play, right? As opposed
Thank
to
you for you did the magic metaphors today.
That was nice.
But I mean, I think your model is or your theory of a model is correct in that if they did trickle it out, there would be more interest. But we've seen more success in the one-day model right now because if they get 50% in that first day, they're probably going to make it.
They're probably going to make it,
And what's another interesting component of this is that it is a better business choice if the thing is going to fail to cancel it.
Yes.
Keep the email list that you've generated and start it again down the road.
And that almost always, at least the games that I've been involved with, have almost, I would say 95% of them have funded on that second go.
Is there an example in history where that's really been the case in business, where it's like, oh, this isn't going to work, we're going to stop it now and then do it in 6 months? Like, that's crazy to me.
It is crazy.
But it is successful.
It is. It's really interesting. Back to the rule book thing real quick, because my videos are overviews, I don't necessarily, that's a big reason why I went that route, because if the game doesn't feel complete and you haven't called something out that I need to know, I'm doing an overview because
smart.
I can't play a full game maybe.
But is that a detriment to your, or is that not a point against them because you're not always reviewing either, but is that a thing to mention?
So when I do those, I do mention that I played this one time. Yeah. I almost never play more than once, maybe twice. If it's a little card game, definitely play more than once.
Sure. Depending on time.
Yeah, but some of those bigger games, big thematic ones that I've done, you play once and then I want it to feel like, hey, like I said, I played this game. Oh my gosh, let me tell you about this thing.
Initial impression. First look. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it makes more sense to do your format with Kickstarters because I can think of 2 times where we did a how to play video that was very specific and a game the game episode where we are demonstrating the rules, and then that game hasn't funded because we were hired to do a video with a prototype, and then it leaves us in an uncomfortable situation where we put up this content and no one can get a hold of this game that we're essentially advertising. We're showing it off. Yep. So then we look bad and have egg on our face. But if you just do a review, people know this is currently on Kickstarter. They know it can go anyway. That's part of the whole deal.
Right.
Then you're safe.
Yep. And we put up that whole thing at the beginning about, hey, this is a Kickstarter project. The rules might change because inevitably they'll look at that video 2 years from now and they'll have the game. But you said, well, that's because it changed,
Yeah, there's that caveat.
And you would hope that it would improve. You have the better version.
And it's interesting because we have it in text. And at the end of every episode, I said, all right, folks, just a reminder once again, this has been a Dice Tower paid preview. Everything you've seen here has been in prototype form, and so forth. But people still like, oh, well, that tray doesn't look done. Well, no, it's a prototype.
Cool, you can read and hear. Ooh.
But yeah, so playing can be frustrating. I agree, absolutely. And we've had at least a handful of the games. I would say the bulk of the stuff I've done is funded, but we still have stuff that hasn't, right? I mean, it's inevitable. It's going to happen.
What's one that really sticks out in your memory as an excellent game that you were very surprised?
Oh, my gosh. That didn't fund?
Oh, that's actually kind of what I want to know is what didn't that you loved, actually.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't think there's anything that I love that didn't fund.
Because you got taste, man.
Yeah, I mean, I am fairly picky about saying yes, and then it's also related to my schedule, right? Because it's pretty jam-packed.
Yeah, 200 videos in 2 years
Yeah.
is insane.
Yeah, so it's a lot of work, and I love it though. I mean, it feels like I'm retired. I'm just having a blast.
So that's 2 videos a week.
That's about right. Yeah.
Yeah, because 200, 52, that's 100 a year, 52 weeks in a year.
Yeah.
You get 2 weeks off.
Yeah.
Wow. So you've treated this like a full-time
Yeah.
job.
It is.
I mean, it is your complete full-time
now,
job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And you do most of everything yourself. You edit yourself.
I do everything.
You film yourself.
Film,
You're
edit.
on camera.
Yep. So the studio we have is much like what you have here, but it used to be my kids' playroom in the basement, and now I've got a game toppers for my table, and I've got permanent lighting and all that in the room, and money that I do make, I put a lot of it back into the show. So I now have 3 cameras I can use. Finally have wireless lavs instead of wired lavs, things like that. But it's a process, right? Because it's all expensive.
It all makes a difference. Like every gradual step sure is nicer.
And it just steps. And I recently I love this for inserts and B-roll. I got my own rail, but a mini one that I can put on the table and shoot all the B-roll right there.
For people who don't know, this is
Yes.
a little slider for the camera to sit upon and get a nice smooth moving shot. So what is your advice to people not necessarily trying to make board game videos, but that are either laid off or in a job that just feels like they've been doing that forever? Because you are really an example of turning those lemons into lemonade.
It is. So I have to wonder, if they hadn't laid me off, would I still be doing it?
Right?
Right? Because it is really, the layoff was the catalyst for me to step it up, right?
So many hero journeys start with I was laid off.
Yeah.
Really.
Absolutely.
And it was a comfort zone, right? It was a 6-figure a year salary, and
Ain't mad at that.
yeah, so it was nice, comfortable, but it was soul sucking as well.
Yes.
And it started. The thing is that it started out as a small company, and it was all about let's make cool stuff for cool people, and then it turned into, did you get your timesheet in? How's your usability this week? That's what it turned into. Metrics. And it just stopped being fun.
Yeah.
So it was just every Sunday night, it felt like I had homework and I hadn't done it. Like I was back in school.
Oh.
Yeah.
It was just terrible. Monday mornings, I just felt sick going into work.
Ugh.
And now with this, I'm like working when I don't need to work. And I'm
Sure.
like, I'm having so much fun.
It's midnight, and yet you're still playing with your slider in the girls' playroom.
Look at this, and I'm super picky about my stuff. So we'll have done a whole hour of recording and editing. I'm like, nope, don't like it.
I was going to change to a new gaming topic, but I saw an opportunity to rant about politics, and I will take it.
All right.
Well, this to me is the beauty of the idea behind universal basic income. Jake's head is on the table.
I also saw a social media post today about you in a completely unrelated show, and at the bottom it's like, also we talked about universal basic income.
No, that was I was interviewed on James Hunson's show,
that's what it was.
Starting
right.
Role for Gamma Ray, and I was asked what game changed, turned me into a gamer, changed my point of view. And I said Scrabble, and he said that's not pretty enough on camera. And I said Mall Madness, and he said great. And I said I'm going to turn this into an opportunity to talk about universal basic income because everyone starts with money in the game. No, but the idea that if money were no object, what would you spend your time doing?
This would be it.
And that's not necessarily the principle behind UBI. It would be enough to live, to feed, clothe, shelter yourself, and then what do you do from there? Because I think so many people find themselves not finding joy in what they're doing.
Yes.
And why? We live in the most prosperous society in history. And there's so much potential, and we're going to have to find new ways to innovate after robots take over,
This is true.
Anyway, just throwing that out there.
Well, the comfort that you mentioned.
Yeah.
That's the complacency that comes
It
along
is.
with it as well. It's like you are comfortable and you are safe and you are meeting your hierarchy of needs in terms
True.
of
Maslow.
shelter in terms of shelter and food and all that stuff. So that's biologically the thing you kind of should be doing. But
Sure. If
the
you
joy,
lop off the bottom of that hierarchy of needs,
Right.
then what?
but the joy is not
You
always.
make videos about board games in your basement.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. You do that in your spare time, and you realize that, oh wait, maybe this is something I should be doing all the time.
Right.
Yeah, I just want to ask all listeners to ponder the question, not quit your day job, but what would you do if you could do anything? Had all the free time in the world to do whatever you wanted?
And
Also, yeah.
I was gonna say what's interesting is that I don't make anywhere near the money I used to make, right? But I am way happier than I have ever been in my working career.
And what's life really all about? You know, you can't take it with you.
Stability has gone out the window, I think, for us when we leave the job, the salaried job, right, or whatever, and we've gone into this freelance world. And though we're all doing pretty well as individuals, it's like it's still uncertain.
Right.
But that uncertainty also kind of fuels us.
Yes, it does. And like even coming out here and seeing you, right? It was a choice because I was like, I've got stuff to work on that I probably should be working on. And in fact, I was supposed to stay until Tuesday, but I'm leaving Saturday now so I can get stuff done before I go to Dragon Con.
Yeah.
So Dragon Con, I'm playing in a charity game, Warehouse 13. Infinite Dreams has made a Warehouse 13 board game, and I'm playing a charity game with Eddie McClintock, who is the star of that show. So
That's amazing.
So those opportunities happened, and you have to take advantage of that. I get to be on Game the Game. I'm going.
Yeah.
It's so awesome.
Absolutely. Well, we should talk about what we played on Game the Game this week because I am in love with this game. I had to move away from the mic so I could yell. This is such a good game.
Wait, before we even get too deep in it, is this a prototype?
Yes.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
I don't even believe it.
I know. It looks done.
I'm pretty sure
it's
it
polished.
was. Yeah.
This company has done an amazing job.
Yes, this is Moonrakers from IV Games. Yes, I always am like,
It
wait,
is IV Games.
Roman numeral
4?
4 games?
Is it 4 games? Yeah.
Roman numeral 4 games.
IV Games. IV Studio.
Studios,
Without
that's
an
what
S.
it is.
Sorry.
Is it singular?
Studio, no S.
No
Yes,
S.
IV Studio.
IV Studio.
And this is the first game.
Yeah.
This is a 3-fella creative team. They are based in Nashville.
Yes.
And I was basically referring to them when I said about statistical spreadsheet. They have mapped out the like
all the permutations,
thousands and thousands of hands because a deck builder, a game in which each player has a starting deck and adds cards to their deck based on the outcome of their turn and whatever money they have, credits in this case, that they have available to add either new crew members or new ship parts because it's space themed to their deck or to their ship. And engine building, you're building a mechanic that will make you more and more powerful as the game goes on.
Layered onto that is the negotiation part of it too,
Absolutely.
where contracts that you complete to get credits to buy more things can generally not be accomplished by yourself. You need to work with other people because you have a limited amount of resources.
They've made the game hard up front, so you have to negotiate.
Absolutely. So explain sort of how gameplay works, Mark.
Yes.
Since you're a professional at this.
You have a tableau, which is basically your spacecraft. Right. And you are at the base and you're trying to decide if you're going to go out and do these contracts, and you're looking at the available contracts. You're like, oh, you know what? I could do this. And in your hand, it's like any deck builder. You have 5 cards. All right. So the thing that's really interesting that I find is that you have one action.
Just one on your turn. You don't get to play your whole hand.
And if you don't have a reactor in your hand, then you're pretty much one card and you're done.
You're limited.
Yeah. But
reactor, by the way, is a card that gives you more action.
Yes. And it starts to chain and you can get more. And then you can also find ship parts to upgrade your ship to give you even more possible actions. And different cards will allow you to draw more cards from your deck, which might give you more things like reactors, more actions, and so forth. So, and again, it's one of those things, you play all the cards, you play them or you lose them. So you have to play your hand and be smart about it. And I love that they had that like tree that you play out the cards in this kind of tree flow.
And that was not actually in the rule book. That was one of the creator Austin's little, he said he plays Dominion that way, where, because each reactor you play says take 2 more actions, plus 2 actions. So you play the reactor, and then branching out below that, you play the 2 cards that were the actions that came from that reactor, because the first reactor was your first and only action at that point. And so it makes this beautiful tree where you can clearly see how many more actions you have available.
They should
really
put that
cool
in
way
the
to do
rulebook.
it.
That's
We
a great
did tell them
idea.
that
Oh,
was
they did,
because
yeah,
it
I
is a
think they're going to.
prototype. Yeah,
That's a great
it
idea.
doesn't feel like a prototype, except for one of
Right.
the ships.
Does not.
They're going to
Oh,
print
yeah.
a little differently because
Yeah.
it sort of disintegrated in the traveling.
Indeed.
Thin parts on
And
minis.
there's crew that you can hire to add to your deck, which have even more powers that allow you to do like half damage. And speaking of damage, we have to talk about that every contract you do has a hazard to it. And there's hazard dice you roll. And the thing about the negotiation, which is great, if there's 3 hazard dice, you negotiate. Everybody has to roll, and they have to defend their own selves from the hazard. So you play shields to block the hazards, or you might have crew or ship parts that help you negate that as well. So
Yes. The first thing that we should always say is what the goal is. So
yes.
get to 10 victory points.
10 victory points.
I forgot to say that.
Are they victory points, though?
They are prestige in this
Prestige,
game,
yes.
but they're unlike other games in where once you earn stuff, there's relatively few ways to lose those points.
Yeah,
This
no.
is all about players moving up and down the scoring track, the prestige track, because the hazard dice Mark was talking about. If you are not able to block that damage, that's not like a health level. It goes to your prestige, your victory point, your win condition.
Right.
So when you're negotiating for this contract, you do not want to roll that dice unless you have the shields to block
Yes.
it, because
Especially
losing
when
a
I
victory
roll
point.
it.
Yeah. Mark was extremely unlucky in our playthrough when it came to hazard dice.
Even
hilariously
swapped
so.
the dice,
Yeah.
and it didn't matter.
So we all 3 of us have actually played this game. You 2 played it together. I played it separately. You guys love it.
Oh
I
my
liked
gosh.
it a lot. But
So
Well,
this
deck
Becca came
building
out
is my
like,
favorite genre,
Yeah.
so it's you say deck builder and I'm in. But this really delivered in terms of balance, because we were all just a couple points ahead or behind by the end of the game. Even though Mark was rolling terribly,
Yeah.
he still was able to negate that, especially because with negotiation, you can always choose to negotiate with the person in last place, which means that there's that catch-up mechanic
Yes.
constantly going on.
Which
Because
is
I
really
was like
good.
a little bit ahead for most of the
Yes,
game.
you were.
And my accidental strategy I happened upon was getting lots of reactors in my deck
Yes.
early, so I
was
always
key.
was able to play have actions.
That's what's also interesting about the game is that it's not actually, there is no catch-up mechanic beyond the meta game of seeing the score visually, right?
the negotiation does it for
so
you.
it's not even built into the rules. It's actually built into the concept of the
humans.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
Utilizing our instincts.
Indeed. And I really like that track because a game feels like a tug of war. Like we
Yes.
talked about. I really felt like, oh, I'm pulling this way. No, I'm pulling
Yeah.
back. It just was this really cool, just engaging, right? And how you have to engage the other players. It's not just sitting here playing my cards and then your turn.
Oh, no.
And then
Yeah,
it comes down to, sorry.
Oh,
It co-
sorry.
it
Player
co-
interaction is so important.
Yes, it is.
We all have opinions.
And then it came down to that last, literally, you or I were going to win. And that last hand of mine, no reactors. And I had the card, other than that, I had the cards to get the 3 points.
Oh no! And you had to choose to essentially pass your turn and take
Yes.
a rest turn, which is called stay at base, where you get another credit. You get to grab a new objective card, which can be a secret victory point condition.
Mhm.
But
And that's
on
probably-
the last turn of the game, because actually you were a turn away from winning, so were the other
Yes.
2 players.
Yes.
Everyone
Wow,
was
it's
a
neck
turn
and neck
away
and
from
neck and
winning.
neck.
really was neck
That's
and neck.
crazy.
And it really came down to one of the creators, Zach Dixon. He was on the show with us,
Mm-hmm.
and the previous turn, he had attempted to. You can do negotiation for a contract, which makes a lot of sense. If it's something you don't have the cards in your hand to achieve all by yourself, you can bring people with you. If there's a smaller contract or later in the game when you've got a more OP deck, you can take that contract on completely alone. The only deterrent is rolling the hazard dice, which could take away your prestige. So Zach attempted a big contract all by himself, and he would have got it, but he rolled the dice terribly.
Oh, it was amazing.
Otherwise, he had won the game. And then the next time it came around to me, I did a contract by myself, and I did it. But it was really down to those dice.
To me, that's
was.
what kind of sets the game apart, because it is a great deck builder, and I'm also biased towards deck builders. They're one of my favorite genres. But the fact that in the negotiations, you're not only negotiating for the reward, you're negotiating for the hazard.
Yes.
And that those are both almost 2 separate negotiations. negotiations really changes it, and that the hazards vary your score. So like that means every negotiation is a potential game changer.
Yeah.
Which is a crazy aspect
is.
to think of, is that
It's
you
really
could change
cool.
the game every turn.
And the other interesting thing about this, I've had at least a handful of games like this where I love the game so much, but I still can't, because it's a paid preview. It's a promotional piece. I can't rate the game. I can't say you should back this right now.
Well,
You know.
you can give your money to Kickstarter.
Yeah, this is true. So it's
You
interesting.
can on this podcast,
That's
I guess.
true.
Yeah,
You should back this game
absolutely.
because it
No
is
rules
so much
here.
fun.
Absolutely. I
I
mean,
had a blast.
Yeah, I don't have to say anything nice on this podcast or ever really, because we just play through.
Yeah.
I give no opinion one way or the other if I didn't like it.
Right. Yeah, and that was really fun. Also, in gaming, we don't. Also, I noticed on your show you don't do that a lot. Give the opinion at the end.
Well, we specifically for separate topic, but
Yes.
that's a different type that draws in different type of sponsorship,
Mm-hmm.
and it is not beneficial for a game company if you have a reputation for tearing games apart. That's not going to help them sell their game.
Right.
There's no benefit to
There's no
tearing it
benefit,
apart
right?
either.
Absolutely.
Like,
It does make sense,
People
yeah.
can see whether or not it's their type of game by watching us play.
Yes.
So if it's not a game for you, you're gonna know it.
Right. Exactly.
So I don't need to.
Yeah, if you don't like
say
deck
anything.
builders, then it's not
I
something.
mean, everyone likes
what's
deck
wrong
builders.
with you?
I
Is the question.
There's definitely a thing out there about deck builders, though.
Is there?
Yeah,
What's the
because
thing?
it's oh my
Jinx.
gosh, I've heard this a lot lately. That another deck builder. You know,
Strong
it's,
disagree.
yeah, I know. I love
I
deck
mean,
builders.
nowadays it's like, oh, another game. I mean, every
Right.
that's like
Yeah, yeah,
not
yeah.
fair.
Oh, another game that falls into any genre category that I've seen 50 games in.
Yeah,
Actually, you know what? I will say, when I saw Moonrakers for the first time and started looking through it, I was like, oh, cool art, good design, but this doesn't look much different. And that was my outset. Then I read the rule book. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I like this. And then I played it, and I like, oh, okay, I like this a lot more.
Well, there
But
are a
I
lot of
was-
space themes and a lot of deck builders in the
Yeah,
world.
So I will say, that it is familiar territory.
Yes.
And I want, if I'm gonna get a deck builder, I want the next level of
Yeah.
it. Yes, that is true.
and I feel like they do that in
Yeah.
several ways in this game.
Yeah.
It's the stuff you love in deck building is here, but there's some really nice tweaks to it.
So, Mark, this was your topic. So tell us
Yes.
about what has been turned into a movie before.
Right? Well, we have like obviously way back Clue, right? Was a
Not
big
way
one.
that's still a timeless classic.
It's still timeless
I
classic.
could watch that movie
It
a
is.
million times.
We have Battleship, which oddly enough,
Burn it in hell.
Yeah, I know. My kids though, they grew up watching it, right? They loved it.
What?
Yes, I'm
That's
serious.
like one of the movie of the week action
It
flicks.
is. It is.
It's just
Totally
giant
that.
ships
It's just
sinking.
giant. However, I think what was cool about it for them
I feel old now.
and is that at the time, you know, my grandfather was still alive and he was a World War II vet, and the fact that they brought actual World War II vets in.
Oh, I
to
never
man
saw
the
it. I'm
ship.
just talking shit.
So yeah, no, they brought them in to actually man the ship that saves the day, and these are real
Whoa.
World War II vets that
That's
they
so
brought
cool.
in,
That's cool.
and that were real Navy that fought in the war. So I thought that was pretty neat. The movie, yes, it's just a video game action pack thing, right? And it's absurd and over the top, but they actually throw in some "you sank my battleship" stuff. You know?
Yeah,
no,
well, they have
don't
to.
you
They have to give
dare.
it every single one.
So there's that movie, right? And Clue, like you said, is obviously classic. right?
Absolutely.
Clue's
But-
amazing, yeah.
I still
Flames
don't know that I.
on the side of my face.
Yes, I love that so
I
much.
am your singing telegram. Shot in the head.
So good, so good.
I love it very deeply.
Jumanji as well.
Jumanji is
Yes, I
And
hadn't
if
thought
that
about
was-
that. I thought there were 2 board game movies.
Oh,
And then
no.
you mentioned Jumanji,
yeah.
which of course had the sequel a couple years ago.
Well, the
Right.
reboot, technically,
The
right? Because it's a
reboot.
different
Reboot,
thing.
yes.
It
It's a
is,
video
but
game.
it is a sequel because they go back.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
I haven't
It's a
actually
tie-in.
seen
And
it.
they even there's
Stop the podcast, Jake. You have to see Jumanji.
Okay, great. I will. I'm sorry. Oh, my
Oh my
gosh.
god,
This
it
is
is so
sad.
wait. What's the not sequel called?
Oh, what is it called? I don't
Yeah,
know.
because there's another one.
There's
Don't
another
worry,
one coming.
Google knows.
Return to the Jungle?
Welcome to the jungle.
Welcome to the Jungle. They did an amazing job with this.
They
Yeah.
really did.
Oh my gosh, it was so incredible. I was like, I don't know, and then we saw it like the week later again because it was just so fun.
It was a great reimagining of it. I saw the
Yes.
trailer, so I feel like I know what's going
Yeah.
down.
You don't,
and
though.
like, okay,
You
great.
don't. Go see it.
I
You
will.
don't,
I
you
promise.
don't understand it,
But
till
I
you see
like
it.
that they didn't just redo the old story. Like that was what a great interpretation of it.
Yeah, so that's those movies are just a blast and done well, acted well, story's great, all of that. Right?
Put Dwayne Johnson.
Dwayne Johnson is hilarious.
Let that man read the phone book. And
Yeah.
I'm happy.
Well, and the combination of him and Jack Black, oh my gosh, it's so good.
So are we going to pitch board games that we can turn
yes.
into movies?
Absolutely. Now, I do want to, before you pitch, let me just tell you, I've heard wind of a Settlers of Catan
Yes.
movie, and I think this sounds like a horrible idea because of the examples given so far. Games with characters built in have a personal touchstone, a place to go from. Battleship is about ships. There's not a personal story.
Right.
There's not relationships there to dig into.
Farmer
And in my
Dietrich
opinion, a
has
good
land.
film is about relationships.
Relationships,
Good
yeah.
acting's about relationships.
Yeah, it is.
So that's my caveat of what I want in a game.
Good.
Pitch to me.
Well, that's good because my favorite type of game is big thematic story-driven games. So it's going to have characters and all kinds of stuff, right? So, and I feel like there's a ton of really good Cthulhu options.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Lovecraft's
That's
begging for real
huge.
movies, but there's been so
Yeah.
many like independent films that
Yeah,
just
but-
didn't quite hit the mark.
The
need a lot of
storytelling
money.
in the board game is so much better than any of that stuff,
Yeah,
right? So, like
that's
Mansions
true.
of Madness,
That's a
second
good point.
edition, I would love to see that as a movie.
Well, Betrayal
Absolutely.
is almost like a TV show, like especially the legacy version of it
Yeah.
could be its own
Absolutely.
miniseries. I
Oh
feel.
man, you know Rob's probably talking to somebody.
yeah.
Well,
It'd be
that game in
phenomenal.
particular because it also spans the generations, right? So you can almost make it an anthology show of different characters or
Yeah.
different same actors playing other characters of their own generations.
Oh wow, that's a terrifying thought. Yeah, it
that's
seems
kind of what
like
you did on our
some-
show.
Right.
Would do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's pitch this to Netflix.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'd be awesome.
Oh man. Okay,
And
done. We did it.
Yeah.
Short segment.
Yeah, so the thing about Mansions, though, is that all those tied-in Cthulhu games have the same characters. So you could use all those guys.
Yes, that's right. Eldritch horror,
Mhm. Eldritch Horror, Arkham, all that stuff.
and they all have similar characters.
Yes.
Oh.
Built-in
So I
franchise.
love that
But they
as
have
a
like
movie.
40, right?
They do.
There's
You
so
wouldn't
many.
use them all, right?
Sure.
But you'd-
But they've written a little backstory on the back of the card.
That's the
of
thing. There's tons
What
of,
has decreased their sanity scores?
tons of lore around it, right? I mean, it's just so cool.
That's a
so
good
I
one.
that would be one I would be like, yes, I'll wait in line for this.
You know, Roots one I feel could be a good Pixar film.
Root, really?
Absolutely. Root. No, Roots is something else. That's a mini series from the 80s.
That's
Yes.
Roots. That's Roots.
Plural.
Roots
Very
without the
different.
S.
But would
yeah.
Root lend itself to a story-driven thing?
I mean,
Uh,
again,
I
it's
think-
a Game
I
of
think
Thrones in the
something there.
forest, so
True.
it depends if you have your
True.
characters. Like, I mean,
Relationships.
I think you make
Yeah.
a good point of like having a built-in character base.
Yes.
Let's make that great point. But like, if you have tension
Mhm.
and you have world tension, you make characters in that world.
Yeah.
You've got it. Like the Root has those kings on the bird side of it. What is it? The Eerie. And so like the tale of their constant being deposed every 4 turns. I feel like the power struggle there in relation to all the cats, and then you have these rebels out in the forest, and then you got one guy who's out there making trouble for all of them. Yeah, that's like a dynamic waiting to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the premise of Roots, the game.
Yeah.
I think it makes, well, and they're all anthropomorphized animals in the different factions. So,
I'm thinking animated.
yeah,
maybe.
Animated,
definitely
yeah.
animated.
Yeah, it
We're
would be
not going
cool.
the route of cats. I watched the trailer
No.
last night.
Wow.
It's
How are those
an
nightmares?
abomination.
Yeah.
It's an absolute
Right?
abomination.
It's scary looking.
Anyway, that's not the kind of cats we're talking about. We're talking about the game Root and how it should be a film.
Yep. What about you, Becca?
You guys said all the good ones.
There's lots of others.
We'll take a beat. I mean, like
You know, I'm just going down my list of what I liked from 2019.
Nice.
I have a little phone list. Grim Masquerade from
Oh.
Skybound. It
Yeah.
does take existing
Yeah, it does.
properties of grim fairy tales.
Yep.
But what if it was an adult, murder themed, a deception themed, the spy thriller, like Murder on the Orient Express, but
Yeah.
with
Ooh.
storybook characters.
That could be really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yep. So that's one. And there's any numerous space-related games, right? That would be great sci-fi.
Yeah, I feel like you could also, space game. I mean, Twilight Imperium. I'm always
Yes.
gonna say I'm ready
Boom.
to see that
Okay,
story.
what's your Twilight Imperium movie pitch?
Well, it's
Intherium. What would you say?
I feel like it's a mercenary group that kind of fights for like any faction that'll pay them, but they're made up of like someone who left the Yin Brotherhood and like a bounty hunter from the Soul and like one cat person who's super rich, and how they go around the universe trying to play the different factions against each
Interesting.
Oh, Pandemic the
Pandemic
movie.
the movie.
Pandemic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It would be an
Everybody loves
amazing-
specifically an Epidemic movie.
Yeah, and specifically the first legacy version of it with you can spoil it by now, right? People, have you played Legacy, the first Pandemic Legacy? Oh man, I can't even talk to you about it.
know.
So there's all those black boxes you open that change things.
Yeah, one for every month.
Yeah. So that one in particular would be awesome as a movie.
Yeah, let the whole virus like keep developing.
Yeah.
That's a good story.
And just virus movies in general I love. So I mean that'd be cool.
Yeah. Well, there's so much back and forth. There's so many games that are now made from IP that it's going to happen eventually where the floodgates open of just going back and forth. It's just the industry has to get to this tipping point like comics have done. I mean, think of 70 years of comics, 100 years of comics before Disney and Marvel ever said, hold on, this could be the hugest money-making franchise in history. Do
Well-
we want this, though?
I don't
we
know.
want this now?
I think we want it to an extent.
Yes.
I think we want to experience it, but we don't want it to be exploited.
Right.
Sure, we want our fandoms to be beloved, but we don't want them to be
Right.
corrupted.
Guess we got to make them.
Plaid Hat
so.
has Mice and Mystics, right?
I did.
that's
I talked to
becoming a
Jerry
thing.
Hawthorne
Jerry,
about
yes,
this at
right?
Essen last year. We just played Aftermath, which is one of
Yes,
his games.
right.
So Jerry Hawthorne is the
He's
pioneer
awesome.
of the storybook game. But tell us about Mice and Mystics.
Oh man, did you not know this game?
He's got. I know it's a dungeon crawl with mice. I loaned
Yes,
someone
but
my copy
Fantastic
stupidly.
storytelling in that game.
Never got it
And
back.
like Rich Summer did a bunch of the voice work. You can listen to it instead of read the story stuff.
Oh,
It's really cool.
That's fun.
Yeah. So the story. I don't want to ruin stories for folks who haven't played. So I don't want to go too deep. But I mean, it's a dungeon crawl mice, but how you got to be mice is part of the story and so forth. But it's really, and you're living in a world where everything is giant. So like with the expansion, there's a huge snake, and there's all kinds of stuff that comes into play with that story. I think it would be fantastic, and they're talking about maybe doing something with
Aftermath definitely had a very cinematic feel to it.
yeah.
it.
Well, to talk a little bit.
Everything he does.
Yeah, Jerry Hawthorne works for Plaid Hat Game. Is one of the designers for Plaid Hat Games, and he has originated this whole genre, that including stuffed fables, including Comanauts, where
Oh, so good.
it is a storybook sitting in front of everyone. They're pretty much co-op games where each page has one side that you're reading the story. Sometimes there's choose your own adventure type entries that you'll only read if you come across that part of the game board. And on the left side of the book, there is a little map. So you're moving through different maps as you turn the pages, and which page you go to depends on where you are in the story and on the map. And they're all extremely cinematic, extremely narrative, and just so inventive, just breaking down genres.
Yeah, I feel like Jerry is just a master storyteller.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
just phenomenal.
He
at
made
it.
me cry when he told me the story of Comanauts
Yes.
on twitch.tv/Asmodee at Essen 2018. We were doing a live stream and interviewing game creators up there, way over there in old Alemann.
Yeah.
That's Germany. And yeah, I was just floored by the way he spoke about his games.
Yeah, his games are so immersive, and they definitely give the cinematic feel that we would want to experience in that storytelling. I was also really impressed of like his ability to create the story tree depending where you go, the whole choose your adventure aspect to it, and every route still felt very dynamic.
Yes.
Like there was a world we can't explore because we can't see all the pages, and like the fact that that's all there made it feel real.
Mm-hmm.
There's one last game that I would be surprised you haven't pitched as a film yet. You're looking on my screen to try and
Magic
cheat.
the Gathering.
No, well, that's I
They
mean,
are
you could
working on a
do that.
Netflix
Already-
TV
yeah,
show.
that's already,
The Russo
that's already
brothers
in the,
are
in the works.
producing. Yeah. If you guys, Russo brothers, if you listen to this
They
podcast,
do.
I would like to play Chandra Fire Artisan.
Yes.
If anybody has their email address, please let them know. Yep.
You'd be
That's my
amazing.
pitch.
I would like to voice a dinosaur, please. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, but yeah.
I just want a cameo.
I think it'd be like Gatali Primal Hunger.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I got that kind of a jawline. That's great.
Yeah, I think 10-10 with Trample. Yeah.
The game.
Short arms. I've always liked his
Short
short
arms,
arms.
there it is. That's the
No,
truth.
He has normal size arms.
The game I thought was going to be something that was really immersive and had a really detailed world, which was Court of the Dead.
Oh,
Well, I thought it was too easy.
really? What?
It was too easy of an answer. I mean, so if you played Court of the Dead,
Oh, yeah.
Mourner's Call, I mean,
Absolutely.
It already is a
wrote,
movie.
They wrote more lore than they wrote anything else.
True.
Yeah, it is a movie. That's very true.
Yep.
And they have a crazy elaborate backstory of not only celestials and demons, but they also have the other faction of just death
Right.
and his whole court.
Yep.
But that was a world that definitely, like, I want to
Oh
go
my
live
gosh,
in a
it'd
little
be
bit.
Crazy, right?
Yeah.
I
They,
mean,
they
that
already
game
have a
was-
comic series of it
Yes.
too, right?
A graphic
novel,
yeah. A lore book
Yep.
that is really,
Tons
really
of
beautiful.
artwork around it. Like
Yeah.
you said, tons of just arty story elements.
Yeah, Tom Gilliland is a brilliant man.
Yeah. And well, death as a protagonist would be fun.
Ooh.
Yep.
Ooh.
I'm in.
What if it's just Meet Joe Black? I mean, that's the same thing. Meet Joe Black, Mourner's Call.
That's
All
good.
right, Meet Joe Black, the board game, coming soon to you from Victory Points Industries and Starved Wire. Wow. All right. Well, we've made a podcast here.
Yeah,
Yes.
we did.
Mark,
This was
it's
awesome.
been such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much.
Please tell people, even though we've been talking about it, where they can find your videos.
Oh, yes. So all my videos are on the Dice Tower Network, and you'll find them in a playlist called Game Previews. You can go check them out there, and they're not all Kickstarter. We actually have some published games that we're starting to do previews for as well, so check it out. And then on Twitter, Board Game Corner, Instagram is BG Corner because I couldn't get Board Game Corner.
Keep it short. Keep it snappy.
Yeah,
good,
yeah,
yeah.
some of that works. And then, of course, Facebook and so forth. And you can just find me on Facebook as Mark Streed. So
All right. Jake, since the last time we recorded a podcast, do you have any advice to our listeners, tidbits?
A little bit of discomfort is good. The comfort that you were talking about in your job is good, but you need a little bit of discomfort in your life. And then once you found that, you found your route, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So experience just a little discomfort.
Yep.
Ask yourself what might give you joy today
Mm-hmm.
and do that thing.
It's
Unless
worth
that thing hurts other people.
True. But it's worth it. It really is. I mean, it was rough at first, right? But man, I can't believe where I am. It's just so,
Yeah.
I'm having the time of my life.
If you want to do it, but it scares you, go for it.
Yep.
All right. If you need a change, just do the thing.
It's worth it.
Thanks so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe and like and rate and tell your friends about this podcast. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.